Well, this is going to be fun. So pull up a seat, grab your drink of choice, and listen to me tear apart two ideals so ridiculous I decided to dedicate my time to tearing them a new asshole for the lulz. Solely for the purpose that these terms contradict each other to such levels that even a 12-year-old with an undeveloped mind and little to no political experience, or life experience for that matter, would be able to discern that there is no possible way that these terms can possibly hold water or be mutually exclusive. So the first term up on the chopping block is relatively new to me, and I've heard it in passing recently, but it was the live stream that Andy had with the Bronx blogger, Enoch, Tim, and JF that really put me over the edge to finishing this script. The naive mind of an Antifa sympathizer was enough for me to write this in its entirety. So I also did it while the stream was going on, so consider me #triggered. But let me break away from the emotional side and delve deeper into the core of this. I'll first display the most commonly used variation of the term libertarianism. Now, as you can see from these two definitions, the core of the term is essentially minimalist government, which some libertarians take to the more extreme anarcho-capitalism side of it, and to a lesser extent minarchism. But this video isn't about anarcho-capitalism or minarchism. This is about these particular two ideologies that I'm tearing apart today. So moving on to the other section of this idiotic oxymoron soup, we're dealing with socialism. Essentially the other half of libertarian socialism. Venezuela's very own enriching form of fucking government. Okay, now that these two ideologies are presented, allow me to break this down. The very core of the libertarian ideal is the freedom of the individual, minimal government involvement, and, now keep this in mind, freedom to associate. So, to all of those like the Bronx blogger that believe in this so-called, quote, libertarian socialism, end quote, ideal needs to understand that their commune, forcing individuals to be part of the community, which, by the way, I'll get into that when I move to Anarcho Communism, but essentially having a commune is getting rid of the individual's freedom to associate. You are forcing them to associate, whether or not be at the end of a barrel of a gun or by your own collusion of words. But for the sake of structure, I'll simply say that these ideals aren't compatible unless you remove the amnesty of the individual and their freedom to not associate with your supposed libertarian socialist commune. But in regards to socialism, there is a fun little addition to the definition, and keep in mind my reference to Venezuela. In Marxist theory, it's a transitional social state between capitalism and the realization of communism, which always seems to be the case, doesn't it? In socialism, the government never seems to stop allocating power under its wing until almost every aspect of the economy is ran by the government. Recently evidenced here. However, the old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely, comes to mind. Of course, we are dealing with humans, after all, and there is almost no greater driving force than greed and power. But the end result of this tirade is the libertarian socialism is just socialism, with the belief that a large government doesn't exist. So essentially, it's a hippie commune, which is almost the antithesis of socialism, because at the end of the day, that commune, when it becomes large enough, is going to become a city or a town with their own local laws, and the only people that are going to be around to enforce them are what would equate to police officers or members of the government that we have now. So no, it doesn't fucking work. But anyway, let's move on to part 2 of this little teardown and deal with every dildo waving, bike lock toting, black mask wearing, black shirt Antifa member and what they love to call themselves, usually from their mom's basement in the suburbs from the other side of a $2,000 laptop. As before, I'll present the definition of anarchism from 2 sources and the definition of communism from 2 sources. So first and foremost, let's have a look at the definition of anarchism. Now, there are parallels to libertarianism here. That's why there are those that are minarchists or anarcho-capitalists that profess that they are libertarians. But the reality is an individual that believes in an anarchic society won't lead to some form of state to be formed, doesn't understand how human society evolved from hunter-gatherers to where we are now. But that's a long drawn-out conversation for another time. I'll link some good articles in the description, though, if you feel so compelled to read them. But keep in mind the freedom of association side of anarchism, very similar to the libertarian ideal of the same moniker. With this information in hand, we will move on to communism. And well, look at that. Dissolving private property and putting it in the hands of the common. Actual ownership being given to the community as a whole or the state. Well, there's no way to keep the community from becoming the state. Therefore, the state holds all the private property, and then what? Doles it out as it sees fit? There's no way that could go wrong at all. Oh, wait. The USSR, just to name one. And look at these particular examples. Because, communism is so great, but that's not real communism. But why can't these two ideals work together? Well, easy. The answer is human nature. And with that concept alone, the paper bag that these anarcho-communists are trying to hold water with falls apart. Eventually, a charismatic leader will take charge, and he or she will rule with their party and own needs in mind. The essentially, I'm going to keep all of those people that got me in power happy, you can go fuck yourself type of deals going on here. It's happened many times before. At this point, believing that any form of communism will work is naive and only proves that the individual saying it needs a goddamn history lesson. And the whole, quote, the right people haven't tried it, end quote thing is also horseshit. I go back to the human nature point for that one. But why then do they hold on to the term? Well, they believe that independent little settlements will pop up. Each one has a group or collective that has those who voluntarily give up their goods to the pool, which that pool is then taken from by members of the group as they see fit for their needs. However, as delightful and full of flowers and rainbows that may sound, the issues here are A, there's nothing stopping an individual from simply doing nothing and taking what they need, as there's no laws or regulations against it because there's no government to say otherwise. There's no police officer to say, hey, you can't have 5 pounds of grain when you only really need to eat 1. And B, since there is no government, there is nothing saying Commune X won't be taken over by Commune Y for their goods, essentially becoming what is a raider or a bandit. Why work if I can get from my neighbor at the muzzle of a rifle? And some will say, oh, well, that's just an extreme case. Look me in the eye and tell me that it won't happen. If we were to, tomorrow, we were to completely dissolve the United States, completely dissolve the federal government and the state governments and leave it down to local communes, what is stopping Commune X from taking over Commune Y and forcing Commune Y into what essentially would be hard labor and slavery? Nothing. There's no laws against it. There's no federal government or state government to come in there and tell you that what you're doing is immoral and wrong. The only rule of law becomes a firearm at that point. And sure, you could say, well, if Commune Y has a firearm, has firearms, and Commune X would be less likely to take them over. Fair enough. But at that point, you're making no different of an argument than the anarcho-capitalist is. And also, another thing to point out would be simply, alright, well then, Party X just gets a larger gun than Party Y. Then what? You see, the issue I have with anarcho-communism and anarchy in general is that they seem to be living under this rainbow vision of the world where if government was taken away, the bad people would disappear. The only thing that I have to ask these people is, like, you do see what happens in bad neighborhoods, especially in the U.S., right? And this is while there is a government in place. Could you imagine what would happen if tomorrow there was no law and order, there was no consequences to people's actions other than, the consequences of maybe the person that you kill, their family member comes after you? I mean, it would be worse it'd be equivalent to going back to the Wild West, which even they had some semblance of fucking law. But with that, I digress. My point is made. Libertarian socialism isn't a fucking thing. Anarcho-communism isn't a fucking thing. It's just communism. Call it for what it is, instead of hiding under, especially libertarianism, all fucking things. Anarchism, in of itself, would even look at you fucking ass hats like you were fucking had 3 heads, because an anarchist society would simply tell you, like, no, we don't want communes. We don't want government at all. They'd be able to recognize that these communes would eventually devolve into city-states. And these city-states would eventually have their own government and law, because it's the only way to maintain the city-state. It's the only way to maintain the status quo. It's the only way to maintain the farmers keep working and keep producing food for everybody else. But I digress. I'm done ranting at this point. So with that said, this video was supposed to have been out yesterday. However, my computer decided to cuck out and decided to install and update it about 4 o'clock my time, 5 o'clock my time, and decide all those things you were doing, yeah, no, you're not going to be doing them anymore. So, sorry, it's a day late, dollar short, but still, I'm releasing the video nonetheless. Tonight, I will be having a live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central. It's going to be the start of a regular stream outside of my regular streaming on Wednesday. It's going to be more focused on lighthearted discussion, jokes, just regular stupidity, and of course, booze. But with that said, I hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and or night. If you like the video, leave a like, and if you feel so compelled, hit the subscribe button. And I will see you glorious cunts on Tuesday.